This beautiful girl is named Suyeon, who has been having a forbidden relationship with a handsome CEO named Ji-hyung. Until one day, Ji-hyung was forced to end the romantic relationship because his parents had arranged his marriage with the daughter of a conglomerate. Ji-hyung felt like a coward because he couldn't hold on to the girl he loved. Moreover, all this time, he had been in a relationship that had gone too far and they often slept together. Before deciding to end the relationship, Ji-hyung invited Suyeon to meet and check into a hotel. He relieved his longing for Suyeon through tender touches on the bed, as they had often done. No matter how beautiful the farewell, parting is always something so painful. Suyeon always appeared strong and did not shed a single tear, even as she released her last embrace before leaving the hotel.
나는 즐겨.
However, in the bathroom, Suyeon still couldn't imagine her lover having to be with another woman. Suyeon realized that, no matter how beautifully she dressed up and presented herself, she would still be cast aside for another woman whose status was more compatible with Ji-hyung. After returning from the hotel, Ji-hyung still refused his fiancée's invitation to meet. Ji-hyung chose to go to the office and finish his work. Meanwhile, Suyeon went back to her usual activities. She aspired to be a writer, but her hopes felt distant because it turned out Suyeon was experiencing dementia at a young age and didn't know the cause. Once she got home, she prepared food for her brother, who was really looking forward to it. For some reason, lately, Suyeon had been forgetting important agendas, including dinner at her aunt's house. Suyeon quickly followed her brother and, without realizing it, she forgot the stove was still on due to her frequent forgetfulness caused by her illness. At a fancy restaurant, Ji-hyung could only vent his confusion by downing a bottle of wine. He seemed regretful for adding to the pain in Suyeon's life, which had been filled with suffering ever since her parents disappeared without a trace. In a long conversation, Suyeon's friend and confidant, Ji-hyung, admitted that all this time he had been in a romantic relationship that went too far with Suyeon. However, it has all come to an end now because Ji-hyung has to marry Konglomerat's daughter named Jae-gi to comply with his parents' wishes. He apologized to Jae-min and asked him to take care of Suyeon, hoping that Suyeon would find a good man as her partner. Upon arriving home, in a drunken and unsteady state, Ji-hyung's mother kept bombarding him with various questions about the wedding preparations. No longer wanting to harbor the heartache that was suffocating him, without a second thought, Ji-hyung suddenly asserted to his mother that he wanted to call off his wedding with Jae-gi because he had another woman whom he loved deeply.
안 하고 싶어요. 그만두게 해주세요.
His mother couldn't comprehend why Ji-hyun suddenly wanted to cancel the wedding when this arranged marriage had been planned for a long time for the sake of the family's business interests. His mother reminded Ji-hyun not to take his words lightly because his father would surely be furious if he found out about this. Because his mother kept pressuring him, Ji-hyun eventually resigned himself to the idea that he might have to leave Suyeon. He recalled Suyeon's background, who was an orphan and from an ordinary family, which certainly did not compare to Ji-hyun's very wealthy family.
무슨 가당치도 않은 헛소리 아니 폭탄이야.
Unable to stand by idly after his cousin was abandoned, Jae-min tried to comfort Suyeon at an amusement park. In front of her cousin, Suyeon tried to hide her sadness and was ready to face reality. She promised that sooner or later she would be able to forget Ji-hyun. 100 days would be enough for her to erase those beautiful memories. Jae-min tried to comfort Suyeon.
내가 그 여자 상관 안 했어.
The forgetfulness that Suyeon experiences once again lands him in trouble, ranging from simple issues to quite complex problems. Once again, he forgot to turn off the stove after boiling water in the kettle, causing it to burn. On top of that, he also forgot that his office was holding a hiking event with his co-workers over the weekend, which led to him missing out because the group had already left. On the other hand, Jae-gi, who is increasingly eager to get Jae-hyun's attention, came to his house early in the morning, suddenly entered Jae-hyun's room and kissed him on the lips while he was asleep. Thinking it was Suyeon, Jae-hyun tried to passionately return the kiss. However, he suddenly became emotional when he opened his eyes and saw that it was actually Jae-gi who had kissed him. Firmly, he scolded Jae-gi for boldly entering his room. However, a moment later, he apologized for his harsh behavior. All this time, he considered Jae-gi nothing more than a younger sibling, Today, they are getting ready to head to the studio for a pre-wedding shoot. However, before that, they need to fit their wedding outfits first. All this time, Jae-hyun hasn't shown his bright face at all, making everyone around him feel uncomfortable with his demeanor. Because of his very stressed mind, he truly couldn't pretend to be happy in front of his in-laws. This made Yengi's mother really offended, and she insisted that she wouldn't tolerate it anymore if Jae-hyun continued to look so gloomy.
왜 그렇게 불편해? 왜 내내 혼자 떠 있는 섬처럼 굴어?
When he was with Yengi, he kept remembering the happy days with Suyeon, when the two of them were so romantically embracing on the beach, even recalling a kiss in the swimming pool. It's not that easy for him to erase those memories. Every time he picked up his phone, he would always call Suyeon and hope to find out how she was doing. But unfortunately, the girl never answered. Forgetting that today was Monday made Suyeon late for work, as she thought it was still Sunday. She was relaxing at home until her younger sibling reminded her to go to work. At her office, Suyeon again had trouble with her memory during lunch break. She forgot that she herself had already placed an order, leading to an argument with a waiter.
김선주 씨, 내가 카레 시켰어요?
She then left the restaurant without paying the bill, even though Suyeon had promised to treat her friends. Upon arriving home, Suyeon still faced issues because she thought she had sent her assignment documents to the email address at work. However, it turned out she hadn't sent the assignment at all. Not wanting her condition to worsen and disrupt her activities, Suyeon went to the hospital to check her health. She complained that she had been experiencing severe headaches, requiring her to take pain relievers quite frequently. It didn't stop there. During medical tests, Suyeon experienced significant memory loss. Suyeon was truly shocked when the doctor diagnosed her with symptoms of dementia, requiring her to undergo regular treatment to prevent it from worsening.
저 치매인가요?
On the other hand, not wanting the girl he loves to indeed experience suffering after their marriage, Chio left a check with a sum of money for Suyeon to use as a means for a better life. When they were still together, he once promised to cover all of Suyeon's living expenses and make her happy until the end of his life, but fate had other plans. He thought that, with the check, he could somewhat atone for his mistakes towards Suyeon. Instead of accepting it, Jamin firmly rejected it, considering Ji-hyun's gift as an insult to Suyeon's love for him. Before heading home, Suyeon took the time to greet her relative who works at the bakery. Seeing her sister return home by taxi, surprised in Gangwon, as her sister usually drives herself, it turned out that Suyeon just remembered she had driven to the hospital, left her car in the hospital parking lot, and returned home by taking a taxi. After realizing that this illness had truly disrupted the peace in her life, Suyeon became restless and kept pacing back and forth, shouting as loudly as she could, a reminder from her brother about a form of misuse against misuse. In her turmoil, Suyeon always remembers the beautiful memories with Ji-hyun, even though she tries to forget. She doesn't want her memories of their love story to just disappear. Even the warmth of Ji-hyun's embrace still feels so real to this day. Elsewhere, Yengi was severely scolded by her mother and forbidden from being too aggressive towards Ji-hyun. Her mother believes that a woman must maintain her dignity and should not embarrass herself in front of men. Moreover, Yengi's family holds a higher status compared to Ji-hyun's family. Yengi's father has even prepared a luxurious residence for the two of them to live in after marriage. Her mother doesn't want her daughter to keep begging for love from her fiancé.
시대극 찍어요?
All this time, Ji-hyun has been so harsh on her daughter because of his cold demeanor and lack of focus. All he thinks about is Soo-yeon, who never answers his phone calls. Meanwhile, the girl has changed her phone number just to forget Ji-hyun. On the other hand, to return for a checkup with the doctor as scheduled, Soo-yeon asked for permission from her boss and lied that she had a toothache. Because she came alone, Soo-yeon received a reprimand from the doctor, as she should have come with a guardian or a family member to clearly explain her condition and help care for her at home.
보호자분 같이 오시라는 연락 드렸어요.
She truly felt devastated after hearing the diagnosis that her brain was suffering from Alzheimer's, like the brain of a 70-year-old, and worse, the disease could not be cured. although her current condition is not fatal. The disease is truly dangerous because it will erase all of Soo-yoon's memories. Soo-yoon began to think about the terrible possibilities that could happen to her in the future if her disease worsened, and she would only become like a living shell, unable to remember anything and even unable to remember her family and loved ones.
최고로 악취적인 농담.
How could Soo-yoon possibly forget the kindness of the aunt who took care of her after her parents passed away? Today, Soo-yoon still clearly remembers her childhood when her younger sibling was hungry waiting for their mother to come home. But at that time, their mother never sent any news. The aunt then carried her on her back while the uncle carried Soo-yoon's younger sibling. They took Soo-yoon and her sibling to live with them. It seems impossible for Soo-yoon to forget that sad incident, to prevent herself from forgetting again. Once she got home, Soo-yoon started relearning to memorize simple objects in the kitchen and living room. She began to write down all her daily schedules, from waking up to the evening, on a memo stuck to the fridge. Not only forgetful, but Soo-yoon also became quite sensitive when someone called her forgetful, even though she was still relatively young. Soo-yoon truly couldn't remember the names of objects she used daily for work, like scissors and highlighters, until her sibling quipped that she was already senile at a young age.
근데 누나 노화 현상이 너무 빠른 것 같다.
Even though it was a joke, Soo-yoon was truly upset upon hearing it, to the point where she cried nonstop and locked herself in her room. Soo-yoon even refused to join for meals, despite her siblings' continuous apologies.
늙는 거에 대해서 누나가 그렇게까지 예민한지 몰랐네. 실언했다고.
All this time, Soo-yoon was used to living independently, and this illness came and disrupted everything. To appear normal, in front of the mirror, Soo-yoon reassured herself that she was strong enough to face all of this and affirmed to her reflection that her identity is Soo-yoon. A woman in her 30s, a member of the writing team at a publishing company, and a talented, intelligent woman who once won a novel writing competition. The next morning, Soo-yoon tried to start the day on a better note. She avoided negligence in any matter as much as possible. She noted down all her activities before heading to the office and checked off her list as completed. While enjoying the meals served at the dining table, she forbade her younger sibling from working part-time at Tokurodi and asked them to focus on their studies. However, her younger sibling firmly refused because they wanted to save a lot of money to help pay for her future wedding. During the journey to the office, Soo-yoon felt proud to be able to go to work without any obstacles. In fact, today, she was the earliest employee to arrive at the office.
어머, 오늘 팀장님 1등이세요? 굿모닝.
Meanwhile, at home, Mungkwon was so shocked and devastated after seeing a sheet containing a health report and a prescription for Alzheimer's medication in his brother's bedroom drawer. He became even more overwhelmed with tears after researching more information on the internet about the disease his brother was suffering from. He deeply regretted the joke he made yesterday, calling his brother senile. No wonder, his brother was so angry for no apparent reason. He immediately informed Jaemin about this. Although very shocked and in disbelief, Jaemin tried to comfort Mungkwon and insisted that such a disease usually only affects the elderly, not a young girl like Soo-yoon.
있을 수 없는 일이잖아. 그러니까요.
Both of them tried to make sure to go to the hospital themselves and ask the doctor about Soo-yoon's diagnosis. Jaemin and Mungkwon's arrival made the doctor feel relieved, as he was previously worried that the patient might not have any relatives, which would be very distressing for her. The doctor's explanation made Mungkwon even more frustrated. She couldn't bear to let her sister hide her pain alone because she didn't want to worry the family. Mungkwon tried to remain calm even though her tears flowed silently. Jaemin asked Mungkwon to continue pretending as if she didn't know anything, as long as Soo-yoon wasn't ready to talk about it. He was sure that Soo-yoon was waiting for the right moment to tell her loved ones about her illness. Meanwhile, at Aunt's house, Soo-yoon wanted to spend time chatting after coming home from work. Special dishes were always served for her niece. All this time, Aunt was so proud of Soo-yoon for her independence, being able to work in an office and live decently with Adi. For the first time, Soo-yoon wanted to ask her aunt about her mother's whereabouts.
저기,
갑자기 왜 궁금해?
In her memory, when she was little, her mother left her, and Audie after their father passed away. Aunt couldn't provide a reassuring explanation, as she believed their mother had vanished from the face of the earth.
상관없다. 그때는 내 마음은 그랬었는데.
Not wanting to see the person who had cared for her become sad, Soo-yoon changed the subject by gifting a shopping voucher to a mall. Although initially hesitant, Aunt accepted it to make Soo-yoon proud. In the courtyard of Ji-hyung's company office, Yangi cried and knelt before her mother, pleading for her to stop scolding her fiancé. Even though Ji-hyung had been cold and refused to attend meetings with the bride-to-be's family, she still stood by Ji-hyung. She threatened to commit suicide if her mother intended to cancel their wedding.
그럼 나 죽어, 엄마!
To comfort Yangi, who had sacrificed a lot for him, Ji-hyung finally agreed to accompany her shopping at Food Nature store to stock up for their new home, and to join her in a cooking class event. Even though it was difficult, he had to pretend to be romantic to make Yangi smile.
힘껏 그래야 거품이 많이 올라가거든요.
Amidst his busy schedule, Ji-hyung still missed Soo-yoon and asked Jaemin to provide him with a phone number that could be reached. On his way home from the office, Jaemin ran into Soo-yoon, who was meticulously counting the number of steps she passed and memorizing her aunt's home address.
115. 116.
While smiling to hide her tears, she held Soo-yoon's hand to follow her down the stairs, and she asked for permission to give her phone number to Ji-hyung. However, Soo-yoon firmly forbade it, as she didn't want to hear Ji-hyung's voice again because it would only cause more pain.
뭐 미안하다겠지. 직접 듣지 않아도 알아.
In front of both of them, Jaemin appeared so strong, but in reality, he was fragile and couldn't bear to see Soo-yoon suffering. He spent the whole night using his laptop to search for information about Alzheimer's disease and its treatment. Even though a delicious meal was served, he couldn't enjoy it at all because he spent the whole day thinking about Soo-yoon. Instead of enjoying the meal in front of him, Jaemin chose to fulfill Ji-hyung's request to have a drink together. At the same time, to celebrate her happiness after receiving a substantial fee for her writing, Soo-yoon immediately treated her colleagues to a barbecue and drinks. While everyone else seemed to be dancing happily, she appeared so gloomy, continuously downing drinks without stopping or measuring. To release all the emotions that were overwhelming her heart, Soo-yoon kept drinking alcohol without stopping. She continued by singing sad songs until she shed tears. At the same time, Ji-hyung and Jaemin were having a tense moment at a soju bar. He intended to reconnect with his old friend, but now Jaemin no longer supports him.
괜찮으니까 불편할 필요 없다 그러더라.
However, if Dr. Kimmy treating Soo-yoon greets him, Jaemin tries to avoid him and quickly goes home so that Ji-hyung doesn't get curious about his conversation with the doctor. Although he initially remained silent, Jaemin eventually spoke up, and Ji-hyung found out that Soo-yoon is suffering from Alzheimer's and needs to undergo intensive treatment. The world seemed to collapse for him. He truly felt useless as a man who loved Soo-yoon, because he found out about her illness too late. For years, Ji-hyung had a happy romantic relationship with Soo-yoon, but Kimmy abandoned her when she was struggling against the pain. Unable to think clearly, Kimmy just remained silent upon arriving home, without answering any questions from his mother when she welcomed him back. With Soo-yoon, Ji-hyung was always showered with a million loves. Even tonight, he couldn't close his eyes. He recalled the times he spent with Soo-yoon. It all started when the two met at an art exhibition and then walked hand in hand enjoying the evening atmosphere by the Han River.
태어나기도 전부터
Ji-hyung completely ignored it when Hyungi sent messages about the many scheduled events for tomorrow leading up to their wedding day. Meanwhile, worrying about Soo-yoon's condition, Ji-hyung followed him and escorted him home. While walking together, Soo-yoon kept resting his head on Ji-hyung's shoulder. He thanked him because Ji-hyung was always there for him. In a heavily intoxicated state, he kept rambling and forbade his cousin from dating as it would make him jealous. He didn't want the man's attention to be diverted. As a brother, Jaemin held a special place in Soo-yoon's heart. The next morning, Ji-hyung's arrival at Soo-yoon's office was truly surprising. For the sake of the woman he loved, he asked the girl to undergo treatment at the hospital where his father worked. And of course, with Jaemin's approval as the guardian. Only able to shed tears, Soyun truly didn't expect that the two men in front of her already knew about her illness. Instead of agreeing to receive treatment, Soyun screamed and refused loudly because she felt that her memory was not a problem, and she could still live her life like any normal person. Soyun truly did not want to be pitied by anyone, especially by the man who left her for another woman.
지금 이대로 난 아니다고 끊을 수 있게 놔둬.
Due to her unstable emotional state and weak body, Soyun staggered and fell towards the door. When trying to help her, Ji-hyo was rejected as Soyun preferred the helping hand of her cousin. Only able to sob, Soyun screamed as loudly as she could in Jaemin's embrace. Soyun's recent rejection left Ji-hyo feeling so desolate, and she could only cry over her helplessness. Meanwhile, at Myunggi's bakery, Mun Jae-eun intended to resign to fulfill his brother's request. However, because Mun Hwan is one of the attractions for the customers, Myunggi did not allow him to resign. He instead became suspicious of Soyun, who suddenly urged his brother to stop working, suspecting a personal grudge. In fact, Mun Hwan wanted to quit his job to be able to take care of his brother at home. At Jaemin's request, he hurried home to persuade him to agree to seek treatment. However, instead of being welcomed, he was scolded harshly by his brother for having the audacity to open the drawer in the room. He also shared all these secrets with Jaemin. Soyun struggled to keep it to himself so that those around him wouldn't worry, but his brother ended up making everything so complicated, even though Soyun tried his best to appear as if everything was fine.
기만 들고 나갔으면 됐잖아. 상관없는 거 왜 만들여?
To vent his disappointment, Mun Hwan shouted in front of his brother and cried out of frustration. If only he could trade his illness, he wished to take his brother's place so that his brother could be safe and live happily for a longer time. However, none of that would ever be possible. All he could do now was to prevent his illness from worsening. After scolding his brother to his heart's content, Soyun acted calmly as if nothing had happened. He then ordered a lot of food because his brother needed to eat.
내가 방에 전화 갖고 나와.
On the other hand, Mrs. Hyanji visited Jae-hyung's house and asked that her future daughter-in-law undergo treatment at the hospital. She suspected that Jae-hyung was experiencing pre-wedding depression and needed to be treated optimally. As a good future mother-in-law, she had prepared a prestigious position for Jae-hyung once she was married to her child. She planned to appoint her as the president-director of one of her companies. While in the sauna, Hyanji kept defending Ji-hyung, even though her mother kept taunting her with harsh words, saying that Jae-hyung didn't truly love her. To monitor Soyun's condition, Jae-hyung tried to get her phone number, but Jamie was still reluctant to give it. Firmly, she forbade Jae-hyung from getting involved in Soyun's treatment, saying she would handle it herself. On the balcony of the skyscraper, a frustrated Jae-hyung could only recall the beautiful memories he shared with Soyun. Remembering that only Soyun was able to make him smile and forget all his problems. He could still clearly hear in his ears the girl he loved repeatedly saying beautiful words as much as she could, indeed, truly.
사랑해, 좋아해, 사랑해, 좋아해, 사랑해, 좋아해.
While watching thousands of vehicles pass by, Jae-hyung remained silent, continually searching for a way for Soyun to truly recover as she once was. While at his office, Jae-hyung kept thinking about Soyun, making it difficult to focus on work. He also thought about how to break free from the burdens and face things like a gentleman. Meanwhile, at her bakery, Myung-hee was furious and scolded Munkin for quitting his job at her shop and choosing to work part-time at a convenience store. To calm her cousin's anger, after work, Soyun took the time to stop by Myung-hee's shop and explained that Munkin needed to focus on his studies and shouldn't work too long. She allowed him to work at the convenience store because it was only for 5 hours, not a full half-day like at her shop. She was able to face Myung-hee so calmly, even though her cousin seemed like she wanted to pounce on her.
우린 공짜로 부려먹어? 편의점 쪽이 여기보다 덜 고단한가 봐.
All day, at the office, Soyun felt there were no obstacles at all. As she noted down her work agenda, everything continued to go smoothly. She was so professional in mentioning the presence of a source who would later be featured in the autobiography she was working on. However, she experienced a bit of trouble remembering the names of famous figures who would be used as reference information for her next book.
헤르만 헤세, 유진 오닐, 도리스 레싱.
During a meal with the Jamin family, Mayang-hee kept discussing her disappointment with Soo-yoon and her younger sibling. All this time, she actually felt jealous because her mother seemed to care more for her cousin than for her. Although not malicious, her words were quite blunt in criticizing Soo-yoon. She speculated why Jamin had to deliver medicine from the doctor to Soo-yoon. To keep a promise, she lied to her family, saying that Soo-yoon was only sick due to exhaustion. While her parents and Yankee's parents were increasingly eager to strengthen their relationship as future in-laws, at the same time, Ji-hyung actually wanted to end it. Because now, she could no longer bear to maintain the lie that continued to torment her soul. The plan made her feel like a living corpse, her body with Yankee, but her heart and mind only for Soo-yoon. After work, she decided to invite Yankee to meet at a fancy restaurant and have dinner together. In the middle of the conversation about marriage, she never expected that C.I. Capria, whom she loved, would break her heart. Yankee, who initially smiled enthusiastically at her fiancé's invitation, now felt her heart shatter after Ji-hyung insisted on canceling the wedding.
못하겠다.
Ji-hyun believes he never loved Yang Ji-ai and has another woman. He admits he was forced to comply with the wishes of his parents, who have maintained a good relationship with Yang Ji-ai's family for decades. How devastated Yang Ji-ai was after hearing that, and she experienced severe shock. Her head suddenly felt dizzy, causing her to vomit. She never expected Ji-hyung to be this heartless, especially with their wedding date just days away. But it turns out Ji-hyung suddenly destroyed everything. Even though it was hard and she couldn't believe what Ji-hyung had just said, as much as possible, despite being hurt, Yang Ji-ai continued to pretend as if she was the one at fault in this matter. Everything she did was just to defend Ji-hyung in front of her parents.
내가 결혼 안 한다 그랬어.
Her body grew weaker on the way back home, and the girl nearly fainted and almost collapsed in her bathroom, causing some of her maids to panic in utter shock and assume that Miss Yang Ji-ai was pregnant. It didn't take long for the shocking news to spread, reaching both Yang Ji-ai's parents and Ji-hyung. How emotional Mrs. Yang Ji-ai was to see her daughter being hurt and played with. She kept cursing and lamenting how foolish her daughter was, still defending a shameless man like Ji-hyung, who had even trampled on their family's dignity. In her tirade, she was concerned about her daughter's weakened condition and even suspected that Miss Yang Ji-ai might be pregnant.
너 임신했어? 임신인 거야?
As the wedding day approached, Ji-hyung easily said he wanted to break up, even though the preparations were complete. As the most aggrieved party, Yang Ji-ai's family couldn't just accept it. On the other hand, Yang Ji-ai's father tried to calm his distraught wife and face the situation with a cool head. He wanted to find a peaceful solution to the problem and resolve it the next day. In his opinion, this might be a misunderstanding because previously his wife had cursed Ji-hyung and wanted to call off the wedding.
결혼 깨자 소리소리 지른 것 때문에 그 녀석의 횟가닥 돈 거지.
It was a different story at his house. Ji-hyung was being harshly scolded by his father for his very embarrassing behavior. He asked Ji-hyung to kneel and apologize politely in front of Yang Ji-ai and wanted the wedding to continue on, no matter what. Even though his parents kept insisting, Ji-hyung remained firm in his stance and was prepared to face any consequences. With sincerity, he admitted that all this time he never had any feelings for Yang Ji-ai, other than a fondness as for a younger sister. He confessed that he already had another woman who needed to be loved and protected, and that woman was not Yang Ji-ai.
지영아.
향기를 사랑하지 않아요.
Blinded by love, even though she was hurt, Yang Ji-ai tried to comfort Ji-hyung and asked him to stay calm. Through a text message, she emphasized that her father would never blame Ji-hyung. Meanwhile, at her home, Soo-yoon adamantly refused to take the Alzheimer's medication prescribed by the doctor. In front of Jae-min and her younger sibling, she shouted and insisted that she would be fine without having to rely on that prescription. She also forbade Jae-min from caring about her anymore.
애쓰지 마, 오빠.
To calm herself for a moment, Soo-yeon fell asleep from the afternoon until midnight. Before resting, she had prepared a meal for dinner with her younger sibling. However, because she forgot to plug in the rice cooker and forgot to turn on the stove to cook the soup, she had to endure hunger at night when she wanted to work on her tasks on her laptop. Her carelessness made her angrily lash out at her sibling without any clear reason. Even so, her younger sibling tried to be understanding. Soo-yeon's illness really made her mood unstable.
불려갔어. 알지도 못해 왜 그래?
Upon hearing from Jae-min that Soo-yeon was feeling quite sick, her concerned aunt decided to visit her niece's apartment, bringing along various favorite dishes for her beloved niece. She didn't want Soo-yeon to live too independently and neglect her health. Her aunt always reminded her that Soo-yeon should get married so that someone could take care of her. Today, she came home from work earlier than usual, because she needed to retrieve some documents from the professor that were stored on her laptop at home. Wanting to just say hello to her cousin, she made time to stop by Nyungi's bakery and tried to memorize each of the favorite bread names for dinner together later. Soo-yeon deliberately didn't cook because her younger sibling would be coming home later for the night shift. Actually, Soo-yeon was trying to remind that Yoon.
몇 시까지야?
10시야.
Upset because her daughter looked so miserable, Tianqi's mother kept scolding her so that the girl would be more spirited. She intended to take her daughter to the hospital, but Tianqi kept refusing because she was embarrassed to admit that her illness was not only affecting her physically, but her spirit was far more exhausted. She was still trying to cover up her fiancé's mistake, and couldn't bring herself to tell her parents that the reason Jae-hyung abandoned her was for another woman. After carefully considering it with her husband, Tianqi's mother finally agreed to meet Jae-hyung in a peaceful manner. In order to soften her future son-in-law's heart, she was even willing to apologize to Jae-hyung for her behavior the other day. This was, of course, so that her future son-in-law would still be willing to go through with the wedding.
내가 그날 좀 심하긴 했어.
However, Jae-hyung was so stubborn and firm in his stance that he actually knelt down and begged for the wedding not to take place. Angry with Jae-hyung's refusal, Hyungi's mother, in her rage, kept hitting him and threatened to drag him by force so that the next morning Jae-hyung would walk with her daughter to the altar. For her, canceling the wedding plans on the eve of the big day would be a huge blow to her pride.
바로 내일이 예식인데, 응? 뭐? 사랑 없는 결혼.
She considered giving Jae-hyung the option to divorce Hyungi if they had been married for a year. Once again, Jae-hyung preferred to be punished today rather than bear the greater sin of toying with the marriage bond. After realizing how conservative his future son-in-law was, Hyungi's father, who had been very patient before, was now truly furious with Jae-hyung's family. Initially, he had planned to hand over all his shares to be managed by his future son-in-law. However, Jae-hyung had destroyed his own family's future for the sake of his ego and greedy love. Thus, Hyungi's parents vowed to remove Jae-hyung's father from the hospital and ruin his career if their daughter's marriage truly fell apart.
죽을 날 받아넘기지 배야.
멍청한 자식.
Jae-hyung's resolve was firm. He was even willing to be cursed and disowned by his family as long as he didn't betray his love for Soo-yeon. His decision this time was not without reason. He didn't want to leave Soo-yeon, who had no one else in her life. Meanwhile, Hyungi, even without him, still had everything.
제가 아무 생각 없이 저질렀다고 생각하세요?
Not wanting her son's recklessness to become a disaster for the family, Jae-hyun's mother sought out the woman her son loved and directly wanted to confront her at her office. She pleaded with Soo-yeon to let go of Jae-hyung and persuaded her to agree to marry Hyungi. Despite being so calm, Jae-hyung's mother still blamed Soo-yeon for being the third person in her son's relationship. She admitted to having ended the relationship and felt guilty for dating Jae-hyung. In fact, she already knew that Jae-hyun had been engaged for a long time. Soo-yeon also emphasized that she had no idea if Jae-hyung would cancel the wedding the next day.
저희는 한 달 전쯤 정리했어요.
Realizing how foolish Jae-hyung's actions were, Soo-yeon asked Jae-min to advise him. If necessary, he should even hit him hard so that Jae-hyung would come to his senses and agree to marry. However, Jaemin couldn't bring himself to hit him and asked Jaehyung to stay on his parents' side. Because Jaehyung's future would be at stake with that decision, he forbade Jaehyung from thinking about Seon's illness because that was his duty as an older brother. Yet again, Jaehyung refused to heed Jaemin's advice.
단순해. 결혼할 수 없었어.
Amidst the escalating emotional turmoil within his family, Tis's condition worsened to the point where he had to be rushed to the hospital. It turned out he was suffering from a gastrointestinal infection due to exhaustion and stress. Previously, he had apparently reduced his food intake to appear slimmer when wearing the wedding gown. The day before, Yang Ji-ai could only cry over the situation while hugging the beautiful wedding gown adorned with luxurious stones. Jaehyung's reckless decision truly disgusted Seon. To her, that man was very foolish for being willing to sacrifice his family for himself. Even though she loved him very much, Seon never expected that Jaehyung would be so cruel to Hyunji and act so recklessly. She went alone to Jaehyung's private apartment to make him realize the reality that it was pointless for Jaehyung to have a girl as selfish as herself. Due to exhaustion, Seon would surely forget everything about him, and Jaehyung would suffer greatly taking care of a woman who behaves like an elderly person. Seon hoped Jaehyung would let her go and pursue a path of happiness by being with the woman his parents chose for him.
당신까지 끌어들이기 위한 거였구나.
However, Ji-young instead scolded her because Soo-young seemed desperate about the illness, even though she was trying to fight in order to be with him. Ji-young was even absolutely ready to die this very second just to be truly and indeed with Soo-young and promised he would never let Soo-young suffer alone. Because he couldn't be reached all night and claimed to be at the sauna. This morning Jaemin came to visit Soo-young's apartment to check on her condition. On Ji-young's wedding day, it was impossible for his cousin to smile and be okay, so he invited Soo-young for a morning walk after enjoying the breakfast sent by his mother. Earlier, surprising news came from his friends that today Ji-young's wedding was actually cancelled.
결혼식 취소 연락 받았단다.
Feeling guilty for being the cause of the breakup between Ji-young and Yangi, Soo-young, who was initially near Jaemin, immediately ran to Ji-young's apartment to force him to go through with the wedding. However, just after taking a step, Soo-young felt confused and lost because he forgot the address he was heading to. Fortunately, Jaemin quickly caught up and escorted him home.
세연아,
Meanwhile, Yangi's parents were very disappointed about the wedding being cancelled today. They felt overwhelmed dealing with the colleagues who had already received invitations and were planning to attend the party. The woman was very angry with Ji-young, whom she considered ungrateful for her husband's kindness. The financial loss might not be significant to her, but she couldn't bear the embarrassment in front of her business associates because of Ji-young's actions. Today, she truly gave up and wanted to calm herself by taking Yangi on a vacation to Europe for a few months. However, Yangi, who was in despair, did not respond to his mother's invitation at all. He forced a smile and tried to reassure his parents that he was fine.
안배도 가고 싶지 않아요. 있어봤자 진역살이야.
In a similar situation, Ji-young's household was also in turmoil. Her mother could no longer answer the many questions about why the wedding was not taking place today. His father was extremely embarrassed to face Yangi's father, who had been helping him all this time. The trust he had built over decades was destroyed in an instant by his son. Although initially he boasted about wanting to ruin Ji-young's family, in the end, Yangi's father still retained Ji-young's father's position at the hospital and did not fire him. No matter what, he still wanted peace even though his heart was deeply troubled. For days, Ji-young's phone couldn't be reached, and his parents didn't know where he was. Ji-young's father kept cursing and accusing, saying that Soo-yoon was the cause of all this. He considered Soo-yoon a poor woman who deliberately seduced a rich man to drain his wealth. However, that accusation was firmly rejected by Ji-young's mother because it wasn't the fault of another woman, but rather the fault of her own cowardly and greedy son when it came to women.
누구 때문에 이 사단이 났는데?
얘기했잖아.
With a bitter smile remembering Soo-yoon's embrace last night, Ji-young left his apartment and resolved to gather the courage to meet his parents that evening. trying to hold back the urge to curse his mother and aunt upon seeing Ji Young's presence, chose not to speak and let his father be the one to judge his son. Ji Young regretted his actions that clearly harmed many parties. He could kneel and apologize deeply to his father. His father didn't say much and immediately wanted to punish him, especially after hearing his son plead for permission to marry the girl he loved. From this moment on, Ji Young's father no longer acknowledged him as his son. The man expelled Ji Young and withdrew all facilities from him, including credit cards, the apartment, the car, and even all investments in his son's construction company.
올라가 집 사람. 지금 당장.
Unable to accept that her only child was kicked out by her husband, the mother kept trying to intervene and chose to forgive him. But it all felt in vain because the father no longer wanted to deal with a son who had betrayed his trust. When the situation began to worsen, it was Nell the mother who had to be hospitalized due to the overwhelming stress she experienced after her daughter's wedding was called off. Si-hyun's mother tried to visit her friend and former prospective in-law, sincerely apologizing for the events of the other day. To quell public curiosity over the cancelled event, she spread a false rumor that her son was impotent and thus refused to have a partner. Although upset, Hyanggi's mother tried to believe the reason as it seemed quite logical. She regretted her emotional actions the other day and didn't want to act childishly. Even though her children couldn't be together, she didn't want to sever the long-established friendship.
평생 친구, 평생 왼수로 등 돌리는 것도 유치하고.
At his office, Si-hyun regained his enthusiasm for work and felt better than before, as his heart was no longer burdened by lies. Even though he was kicked out, he could still stay at the office and take a taxi to travel. During lunch breaks, Si-hyun's mother couldn't bear it and visited her child. She even gave him the car keys and all her savings to support Si-hyun's business, which had declined after his father's investment was withdrawn. Today, Soo-hyun lied again to her boss, saying she had to go to the doctor. In fact, Soo-hyun needed to see the doctor, who was treating her illness. The doctor emphasized to the patient to take her medication regularly, but Soo-hyun never took it, so her condition never improved.
지난번보다 더 나빠졌다든지.
Worried about his sister's health, Mun-gun prepared porridge and insisted that Soo-hyun take her medication. He received news from the doctor that his sister's condition was not improving because she always refused to take her medication. Crying, he kept pleading with his sister to take the medicine for her recovery. But instead of agreeing, Soo-hyun yelled at her brother because she felt fine.
한 10초쯤, 아니 5초쯤 그런 거 같고 벌써 너무 자꾸 수다야?
To minimize negligence like before, Soo-hyun carefully walked around, taking pictures of numerous locations she encountered on her journey to work. She kept trying to meticulously memorize the names of those places, so it would be easier to find her way home later. Soo-hyun also wrote down her full identity on a piece of paper and tucked it into every pocket of her clothing. Listening to Jae-hyun's favorite classical music at home for a moment was able to make her more relaxed. To ensure Soo-hyun took her medicine, after work, Jaemin visited her apartment and invited her for a walk. In the park, the girl joked with the fountain. She should have invited her boyfriend for a walk on Saturday night, instead of inviting herself.
빨리 좋아하는 여자 만들어.
문건이 데리고.
Even though it was just a short walk, it successfully made Mun-kwan so annoyed because her sister didn't bring her phone. At least at home, Mun-kwan cried and scolded her because she was worried her sister would get lost. She kept pleading for Soo-hyun to take the medicine from the doctor. However, her stubborn sister relied more on memos and daily journals rather than depending on medicine.
앞으로 메모 써놓을 테니까 굴리지 마.
When the two of them planned to cook for dinner, coincidentally, their aunt came to visit and brought a lot of food. The aunts joked that Soo-hyun was forgetful, like an elderly person made Soo-hyun feel embarrassed. As she had forgotten, she put her phone in the fridge. Her visit was also to introduce Soo-hyun to the son of one of her friends who works as a lecturer. Priya, who is quite mature and successful, was considered a suitable match for her niece. But Soo-hyun was not at all interested in this matchmaking plan. Instead, she asked her aunt about her mother's condition, whether she was still alive and could be found. Her visit was also to introduce Soo-hyun to the son of one of her friends who visited and brought a lot of food.
엄마요.
Meanwhile, even though they didn't end up as husband and wife, Yengi still shows care for Ji-hyun by sending a cake she made to his apartment. Just wanting to say hello, Ji-hyun invites Yengi to dinner at a restaurant. The girl, despite her spoiled and childish nature, has stable emotional control and doesn't explode like her mother. What Ji-hyun did to her was truly cruel, yet Yengi can still sit and smile together, just wanting to know how the girl Ji-hyun loves is doing. She is also curious about how beautiful the girl is to make her feel envious.
잘 있어?
For a moment, Yengi realized that Ji-hyun must love the girl, not because of her beauty or status. She also mentioned that her parents are in Singapore for several days for a vacation and a business trip. The next day, Ji-hyun went to see Soo-yeon after returning from the office. He truly misses her and wants to rekindle their love story like before. However, Soo-yeon firmly refuses and doesn't want to burden Ji-hyun with suffering. The girl explained that if they got back together, in this situation, it would be very troublesome later on.
여기 다시 올 일 없을 거라 생각했었어.
All this time, Soo-yeon has always carried a paper with her identity, her workplace, and the phone numbers of Mungin and Jaemin as a precaution, in case she gets lost while walking alone. Regardless of that, Ji-hyun pleads to be able to accompany and take care of her until the end of her life. Firmly, Ji-hyun wants to marry Soo-yeon as soon as possible, even if the whole world challenges him. Unable to give any answer, Soo-yeon just leaves Ji-hyun alone and asks Mungin to pick her up.
이제 끝났어. 들어갈게.
At home, Soo-yeon vents her anxiety by continuously drinking a bottle of red wine. Even though Gun cries trying to stop her, Soo-yeon doesn't want to listen at all and keeps drinking. What she wants is to leave this world sooner, so that she doesn't have to feel this pain for too long.
미칠 것 같아. 견딜 수가 없어.
On his day off, Jaemin invites Soo-yeon for a walk in the park near the river. Soo-yeon shares that Ji-hyun wants to marry her soon and asks for her uncle's opinion. Will she agree to this? Without commenting much, Jaemin leaves the decision to Soo-yeon and hopes for her happiness. He also asks her to be willing to undergo intensive treatment and therapy for her future.
객기로 선택할 수 있는 일은 아니야.
Both of them take the time to stop by Mayang H's bakery and greet their relatives. There, a bit of commotion occurs when Mayang H and her mother insist that their uncle go to the hospital because he has a rather large lump on his leg, making it difficult for him to walk. All this time, the uncle has been very quiet, keeping his pain to himself without seeking treatment. Once again, Mayang H is quite curt with Soo-yeon because the shop's sales have declined after Mungkwan resigned. The young female customers openly admitted that they only came to the shop to meet Mungkwan, not to buy bread. Meanwhile, Ji-young returns home briefly just to pack up the clothes he left behind. Even though his father didn't want to greet him, his mother still asked him to sit for a moment and enjoy the meal. This visit was also to ask his mother for something, so he could marry Soo-yeon as soon as possible. That request was met with strong opposition from his mother.
형기한테 등 돌리고 너 할 일 뻔한 거 알아.
Upset with her son's behavior, which she considered outrageous, Ji-young's mother then went to see Soo-yeon at a restaurant not far from her office. She suspected that her son had gotten Soo-yeon pregnant and wanted to take responsibility as the father of her child in the future. However, Soo-yeon denied it, as she was indeed not pregnant. She concluded that Ji-young was looking for excuses to get approval. Ji-young's mother kept pressing, asking what the reason was behind her son's rush to marry Soo-yeon. While pouring tea with trembling hands, the girl finally admitted that she was suffering from Alzheimer's disease. In front of Ji-young's mother, Soo-yeon emphasized that she had never told anyone about her illness. However, Ji-young and his cousin accidentally found out about it after meeting with Dr. Kim. Initially, Ji-young truly wanted to marry Yengi, but after learning that Soo-yeon was ill, he changed his mind and called off the wedding. Like being struck by lightning, Ji-young's mother was truly shocked to find out that her son did everything because he wanted to take care of Soo-yeon. She retracted her initial approval and decided not to allow it. Because she didn't want her son to suffer, Ji-young would have to live alongside a young woman with dementia like Soo-yeon. On the other hand, She felt both pity and admiration for Soo-yeon, who appeared resilient, despite facing life's relentless challenges.
사람이 참 이기적인 동물이라서.
Based on information from Mr. Sun, who is none other than Ji-hyun's friend, his son has reserved a house to live in after marrying Soo-yeon. Upon hearing the news that Yengi's parents had just returned from Singapore, Ji-hyun's mother took the time to greet her friend. At home, Yengi's mother always wants to make her daughter happy because she just locks herself in her room while sewing blankets. She wants her child to be cheerful again like before by sending her abroad. However, Yengi never agrees because then she wouldn't be able to see Ji-hyun's face anymore.
못하고 천대로 늙어주게 생겼어?
그런 거 아니라니까, 엄마.
While giving luxurious souvenirs to her friend, Yengi's mother is still looking for the reason why Ji-hyun canceled his wedding. Ji-hyun's mother suddenly turned pale when Yengi's mother accused her son of having an affair with another woman. It wasn't just the mother who suspected this. Yengi's father also suspected the same thing. During a visit to their home, Yengi's father briefly mentioned that Ji-hyun had another woman, which led him to abandon his daughter. If that really happened, he would never forgive Ji-hyun's family and would tear that young man apart.
아주 섭섭합니다.
At the office, Soo-yeon was able to work well while keeping track of all her activities. However, she encountered a slight problem when her friends caught her brushing her teeth more than 7 times while at the office. She felt a bit isolated when her boss discussed her father, who was suffering from Alzheimer's. Meanwhile, Ji-hyun became more resolute in his decision and asked Jaemin for permission to bless his marriage. He wanted Jaemin to entrust him with the responsibility of taking care of Soo-yeon and promised to be a good husband and love his wife until the end of his life. Even though Jaemin yelled and continued to speak harshly to him, he couldn't sway Ji-hyun's resolve. After work, Soo-yeon wanted to treat her cousin to dinner at a restaurant with a Saja Peng theme. She poured out all her grievances today to Jaemin about Ji-hyun's mother, who came to see her and had found out about her illness. She also promised to be willing to take her medication because her negligence today almost got discovered by her friends.
30분 전에 내가 한 일도 까먹는다.
After returning from the restaurant, while her family was relaxing, Jaemin accidentally overheard an argument between the young Hee and her mother. Her sister kept protesting to their mother for paying too much attention to Soo-yeon. With emotion, she also brought up the past, saying that their mother had already done more than enough by taking care of Soo-yeon and sending her to school until she was 20 years old.
울 뻔했네. 아니, 엄마, 두 애들 20년 밥 먹여준 게 어딘데, 그래?
The conflict in her family made Jaemin realize that indeed there was no one she could rely on to take care of Soo-yeon. If her condition worsens later, her heart began to open a little, and she remembered Ji-hyun's request for her blessing to marry his cousin. Meanwhile at home, Soo-yeon often gets angry for no apparent reason, even picking fights with her younger sibling over trivial matters. She feels that people see her as weak when she was Phony's Alzheimer. In fact, her sibling is just worried about her condition and always reminds her to take her medication. Meanwhile, Ji-hyun's mother can only cry in her room. She can't sleep because she keeps thinking about her son. Even though she always pleads, Ji-hyun no longer listens to her, offering a myriad of reasons just to be able to marry Soo-yeon. Her stubborn son even went as far as kneeling to ask his mother to let him live with the girl he loves. As a mother, she can't bear to imagine her proud son having to spend time in sadness.
너한테 그 길을 가릴 수가 있어. 나 못해.
In front of her husband, she is willing to argue to defend Ji-hyun, but her son chooses his own path. Now she truly feels she doesn't recognize her son and has lost him. The next day, she is determined to accompany Ji-hyun for dinner. Soo-yeon refuses her friend's invitation to party after work. Her co-workers speculate that Soo-yeon now has a boyfriend. Elsewhere, after visiting her husband, Demi can satisfy Soo-yeon's curiosity, who keeps asking about her mother, as the aunt secretly visits a tteokbokki shop, surprising the shop owner with her presence. All this time, the aunt actually knew that Soo-yeon's and Mangan's mother was still alive. But the woman deliberately abandoned her children to pursue another man. Even after decades, she never once visited the aunt's house just to check on her children, not even for a moment, or even to see how they were doing. That's why the aunt has always consistently told Soo-yeon, without hesitation, that she is truly an orphan.
자식 없는 걸로 치고 산다고 지난번에 얘기했잖아요.
It's true. Her mother is still alive in this world. but her conscience is dead, in front of the aunt, without any shame. The woman said that she didn't need her 2 children and only needed a man because she couldn't live without a partner. To her, children are such a burden and restrict her youth. This discovery truly made the aunt regretful, especially when she saw the woman drinking alcohol incessantly and claiming to be depressed after being left by her lover.
안 드실래요?
아니요.
Meanwhile, although she refused, Suyin was forced to join the party with other employees due to the insistence of some of her colleagues. However, before the event started, she wanted to go home early because she had to keep a promise to a guest. The falling snow and the cool breeze that swept through made her recall her love story with Jae-hyung. In the past, when she was cold, that man would hold her tightly and warm her body. The meeting with Jae-hyung had to be postponed to the next day, as Suyin was in a hurry because she had to go meet her mother in another area. The news from her aunt really piqued her curiosity and made her want to see the woman who had given birth to her and abandoned her since she was a child. During the journey, Suyin was very confident and appeared normal. However, as the car traveled further and the road became quite busy, her head suddenly started to feel dizzy. She almost lost consciousness and got into an accident because her car stopped abruptly, not knowing where else to go. Suyin could only cry her heart out. She was truly confused and didn't know how to get home. As she sank deeper into despair, the only name that came to her mind was Jae-hyung. In a state of panic, with tears streaming down her face, Suyin called Jae-hyung to come and pick her up. That idea came at just the right time because Suyin hadn't thought at all about contacting anyone else or waiting. Her mind was completely blank, as if she were in the middle of a barren desert. In Jae-hyung's embrace, Suyin felt much calmer and fell asleep during the journey home. Suyin's unique habit of sleeping with her mouth open made Suyin smile meaningfully, and he felt an even stronger desire to protect her no matter what happens. Upon arriving at the apartment, Suyin pleaded with Suyin once again to agree to be his wife, as she was the only person he could rely on when he felt distant from everyone else. Feeling dependent and not wanting to deny his feelings, Suyin embraced Sayang tightly while saying that he was willing to live a happy life together with her. Suyin promised to undergo intensive treatment in order to spend the rest of his short life. It didn't matter to Sayang if Suyin's memories of her would be erased. As long as she could take care of Suyin and see him smile every day, it was heaven in her life. Sayang didn't care if others thought she was trapped in hell, because she was willing to accompany a woman with a rare illness like Suyin. She didn't care. Even if her parents opposed it, Sayang would still go through with the wedding.
네가 거기 있으니까.
The next day, Sayang visited her parents' house, while her father was on a picnic with Yengi's family. Her mother refused to join because she wasn't feeling well due to frustration over her actions. Even though Yengi's mother kept insisting, she still didn't go because she didn't want to rely too much on Yengi's parents. She suspected that Sayang's father and mother were arguing because of their son's living situation.
그러면서 박원정 혼자 보내?
At the same time, Yengi also refused to join in, preferred to play with his friends to herd cattle. He didn't want to go to the place that reminded him of his time with Sayang. Sayang's visit to the house was to inform them that the woman he loved was willing to marry him the next day. Sayang was determined to carry out the sacred vow, even though his parents did not approve. This time, Sayang's mother could only resign herself to the situation.
네 아버지나 상관없이.
The next day, Suyin was so happy to inform his younger sibling that he would be marrying. Jamin's friend, worried that his brother might face opposition, Suyin tried to reassure Mungwon that Sayang and his mother were already aware of his illness.
알아. 설마 내가 사기 결혼할까?
The young man could only cry tears of joy seeing the happiness radiating from Suyin's face. Especially when he saw that Suyin was willing to take medication and undergo treatment. At their aunt's house, there was a celebration for their uncle's birthday. Mayang and the whole family were preparing a surprise and special dishes to enjoy together. Suyin and Mungwon were also present to join in the celebration. He didn't forget to prepare a gift for his uncle. Outside the house, Suyin also prepared a happy surprise for his cousin. The surprise was the happy news that he would soon marry Sayoung and live together in the house that had been prepared. Tears of joy were visible on his face, and Jamin also beamed with happiness upon hearing Suyin's joy. So far, Sayoung has been the reason he was willing to undergo further medical
떠오르는
examinations.
것처럼 그 사람 전화번호가 떠오르는 거야.
At a coffee shop, Suyin invited his cousin to meet Sayoung and discuss the matter. Spontaneously, Jamin gave Sayoung a tight hug to congratulate them on their wedding plans. However, their hug was misunderstood by the socialite mothers who were watching them from another table. They thought that Jamin and Sayoung were in a same-sex relationship. Suyin, seeing this, couldn't help but laugh so hard that the coffee in his mouth almost spilled. After sharing his happiness with Jamin, Suyin and Sayoung planned to visit their aunt's house to ask for her blessing. However, before they arrived, Jamin had already informed her how happy and surprised she was to hear it. The aunt couldn't hold back her tears of joy and kept crying in front of the whole family.
아이고, 하느님 부처님 감사합니다.
Unlike his mother, his uncle seemed very upset about Suyin and Sayoung's presence at their house. Without any clear reason, he insulted Sayoung, calling him a fraud for being willing to marry a poor woman whom he pitied. Instead of congratulating them, he sparked a quarrel until the mother hit him in front of everyone. He truly couldn't accept that his cousin was getting a wealthy and better husband compared to his own. Thank you for watching.
무섭고 불쾌하단 말이야.
Although a little disappointed, knowing that Jaehyung's parents did not give their blessing for tomorrow's ceremony, the aunt still feels proud because her niece is engaged to a special man like Jaehyung. She continues to praise Suyin, especially after hearing that her future husband has prepared a luxurious residence for them to live in. However, this made Mayung feel even more upset. While visiting his aunt's house, Jaehyung also took the time to prepare his future brother-in-law at the department store. He promised to take care of Mangon's sister for the rest of his life. Before Mangon arrived at the apartment, Jaehyun and Suyin were busy in a small apartment kitchen. So in sync, the two of them were preparing to serve dishes for dinner.
건드리지 마.
Even though it was noted down, Suyin still forgot where she placed the sugar coffee and green tea to be served. Her clumsiness accidentally caused her to spill a glass of hot water, burning her hand. In a panic, Jaehyung quickly applied ice to Suyin's hand and intended to take her to the hospital. However, Suyin just laughed, seeing how worried her boyfriend was just because she had a minor injury. Suyin felt touched by Jihyun's concern, who wanted to comfort her with Mazra. Currently, the two of them have embarked on a new chapter in their romance, moving towards a more serious commitment. Even without his parents' blessing, Jaehyung no longer sees any obstacles in the plans for his happy day tomorrow.
내일은 생각 안 날 수도 있으니까.
While enjoying a delightful dinner with her brother and future husband, Suyin announced that they would soon have to move to their new, larger home. Although initially hesitant because she didn't want to disrupt the happiness of the newlyweds, in the end, she agreed to move with her sister. Moreover, she needed to remind her sister when she forgot, especially about her medication schedule. This time, in front of her future husband, Suyin was very enthusiastic about taking her medication, which made her sister confident that she would return to her old self.
준비됐어요?
좋았어. 그럼 완벽한 거지?
At Jaehyun's parents' house, Yengi, who didn't join the picnic, came to visit while bringing her delicious homemade soup. While her parents and Jaehyun's father were enjoying the picnic and discussing business, Yengi felt lonely in such a big house and wanted to reconnect with the woman who was almost her mother-in-law. Yengi's caring nature made Pippi feel concerned because her nephew had let go of such a good girl. Even though the two had separated, it seemed that Yengi still hoped there were remnants of love for her. To dispel that sad hope, Jaehyun's mother invited her for a walk in the park and asked Yengi to forget about her son. For her own good, she needed to rise from her despair because her future was still long, and she had to find a life partner other than her son. With a heavy heart, she indeed informed that Jae-hyung would soon be getting married to the girl of his choice. Even though it was without her blessing.
결혼할 모양이더라.
Meanwhile, the family aunts, who were enjoying the birthday cake, were suddenly startled by the arrival of Myung-hee's husband, who was in a drunken rage, throwing buckets in all directions while continuously shouting and cursing at his mother-in-law. He couldn't accept that his wife was insulted by her own mother in front of everyone, and even in front of her future in-laws. He dragged his wife to pack up their belongings and move out of the house. Not wanting her husband to go too far, Myung-hee dragged Dong-chul and even hit him on the head. Realizing the situation, the man became even more incoherent, going so far as to claim that his parents' wealth was far greater than that of his in-laws.
짐 싸! 당장 짐 싸고 나가는 거야 우리.
The next morning, as if nothing had happened, Myung-hee and Auntie seemed perfectly fine and came to visit the new home of the soon-to-be married couple. They even brought a variety of gifts and cooking utensils. They arrived while Suyin was still at the office, intending to help organize her belongings. They had a brief argument when Auntie insisted on bringing old plates that Myung-hee thought were not suitable to display in such a luxurious home.
풀지 마. 유치한 싸구려를 이거 어디다 풀어놓으려고 들어.
At the publishing office, Suyin was so happy chatting with her lover on the phone that she accidentally blurted out that she was suffering from dementia. All her colleagues' eyes were on her. To cut down on suspicion, Suyin corrected herself and emphasized that it was just a joke. During a break at work, Suyin carelessly made another mistake in the restroom. Suyin forgot to flush the toilet after using it, which angered the next user. Instead of admitting it, Suyin turned angry and denied that she was the previous user of the toilet.
나 아니라니까요.
The carelessness she considered trivial often left others questioning her. In preparation for her wedding the next day, Suyin was allowed to leave work earlier than usual. She turned down several tempting offers to be fully prepared for her special day. Since her wedding had been announced, her boss gave Suyin a gift of cash before she went home to her new place.
감사합니다.
이 방 나서는 순간 일 싹 다 잊어버리고.
While Suyin and CIH Young were at the office, Aunt Myung-hee and Mun-gwon were busy preparing to clean the house, making it as tidy as possible before the hosts moved in. Not forgetting, Aunt left a special dish in the fridge for her beloved niece. So enthusiastic about welcoming her future husband home, Suyin acted playfully and surprised him in the elevator. Even the elderly women next to CIH Young were delighted to witness the soon-to-be newlyweds. On the way to her house, she was a bit frustrated because she forgot the password to open the door, but CIH Young tried to calm her down and asked her to write down the house door password. Meanwhile, at CIH Young's house, curses upon curses were uttered by his father after returning from Yeoju. Didak Turpak was so shocked to hear from his wife that the next day his daughter would be getting married to a sickly girl.
지영이 내일 결혼식 올려.
Tapuas had embarrassed his father by canceling the wedding with Yengi. Now his son was acting foolishly again, claiming he was ready to suffer for a girl whose background was unclear. He blamed his wife for spoiling him all this time, making him bold enough to defy his parents. However, his wife couldn't do anything to stop CIH Young. She only pleaded with her husband to accept their child's decision and let him be happy with the girl of his choice. Although initially very emotional, in the end, CIH Young's father agreed to calm down and explain everything to Yengi's family. Both agreed to apologize sincerely and prepare to face any consequences.
저기 양해를 구할 일이 있어서.
The tension on Dirak Topak's face was evident when facing Yengi's parents. Upon hearing that CIH Young left their beloved daughter for an orphan girl, curses, insults, and complaints flowed freely from his mouth. It was beyond his comprehension that his daughter's fiancé was taken by a senile girl from a lower class.
야! 도리가 아니면 그딴 짓을 안 해야지!
He became even more indignant upon hearing that CIH Young would marry the next day, even without the blessing of his parents, and continued to shout. Yangi's mother decided to sever the friendship with CIH Young's parents. She asked her husband to promptly fire CIH Young's father from his position as the chief director at their hospital.
이모에게도 그냥 넘어갈 순 없어요. 세상에 뭐라 그러겠어요.
Even though his wife was so outspoken, Yangi's father still tried to handle the situation calmly. He also couldn't believe that CIH Young truly had another woman, even though he was already engaged to their daughter. In her room, Yangi, who had just heard her mother's orders, could only cry and feel sorry for CIH Young and the woman he loved. Although at first she felt jealous of the woman, she now understood why CIH Young chose her and tried to be understanding. In her heart, there was not even a hint of hatred or curse towards that woman. Truly, Yangi was a strong woman, even though her love story was not fortunate.
눈물 아껴. 분할 것도 없어. 용기 피했다 생각해.
Although the guilt was so deep and unforgivable by Yangi's family, at least Ji Young's parents felt a little relieved because they had lessened the burden on their hearts after expressing that bitter truth. In contrast to their family, which was experiencing a terrible upheaval, Ji Young and Soo-yeon were actually going through the happiest time as their wedding day approached. Because tonight was the first night for both of them to settle into their new home as an engaged couple. It promised to complement each other. When Soo-yeon often forgets, Ji Young will always be there as her reminder along.
내가 다 해.
While bringing some gifts for the engaged couple, after work, Jaemin came by and greeted his cousin who was arranging things in her new home. Recalling the hardships both have gone through and the suffering Soo-yeon has faced all this time, Jaemin hopes his cousin can truly find happiness through marriage. That night, he found his aunt unable to sleep and drinking alcohol without stopping in order to dispel the anxiety leading up to Soo-yeon's wedding day. As someone who has cared for Soo-yeon since she was little, she feels truly swept up in the emotions. She remembered when her younger sibling passed away at a fairly young age, while her two young children had to be neglected by their biological mother with empty stomachs. Now, her niece has grown up and is preparing to live her life with her
힘이
partner.
없어서 호의호식은 못 시켰다만.
She feels her niece truly deserves to be happy. Because all this time, she never received love from her parents. In front of her son, she promised not to cry during the wedding blessing ceremony. That's why she wants to shed her tears tonight. The long-awaited happy day has arrived. In a luxurious hotel ballroom, Jae-hyung, wearing a perfectly fitting black suit on his sturdy frame, lovingly held Soo-yeon's hand, who was wearing a beautiful all-white gown adorned with crystals. In front of the guests, the two of them walked in perfect harmony, pledging sacred vows to love and care for each other. Now, the two of them have officially taken on the new title of husband and wife. With a pink handbook on the guest seat, the aunt watched this happiness through tears. The newlywed couple looked so happy enjoying their wedding eve by honeymooning in Jeju Island. Throughout the journey, Jae-hyung kept gazing intently at his wife's face, which seemed unwell during the trip. Even though her body was so tired, Soo-yeon didn't forget to inform that she had arrived at the honeymoon location safely and happily.
아, 그래?
She informed her aunt, and maybe even Jaemin, that she was having a great time, and her husband was treating her like a queen. Her aunt was so touched to hear it. But Mayang, who was always envious, remained curt and continued to criticize her by saying that her wedding dress yesterday was very tatty, even insinuating that her second marriage wouldn't last long without the blessing of the groom's parents. Seeing his wife looking so tired and unenthusiastic made Jae-hyung puzzled. Since the plane ride until they arrived at the hotel, Soo-yeon was always asleep and felt cold, even though the day was so bright. Not only that, when the two of them arrived at the hotel that Anson gifted as a honeymoon present, Soo-yeon just lay down because her head felt heavy.
많이 힘들구나.
To create a romantic impression just after becoming husband and wife, Jae-hyung surprised her with a beautiful white dress for his wife to wear during their dinner together. However, in the midst of that intimacy, Soo-yeon repeatedly went to the bathroom to vomit. The next day, not long after the two of them were so intimate wearing the same clothes to play on the beach, Soo-yeon once again wanted to go to the bathroom because she felt very nauseous. As a result, she didn't want to touch the food that was served, and her body became increasingly weak. Worrying about his wife's health, Jae-hyung, with a raised voice, insisted that Soo-yeon go to the hospital. She, being stubborn, kept arguing with her husband because she felt she was fine and thought that her headache was just due to taking too much depression and Alzheimer's medication. However, it turned out her assumption was completely wrong. The examination of her condition revealed that Soo-yeon was 8 weeks pregnant.
증세로 봐서는 임신이신 것 같은데요?
Not expecting such a thing, Soo-yeon, who was still doubtful, kept denying it and returned to the hotel with a troubled heart. Just thinking about her own illness was already very exhausting, let alone having to conceive, give birth, and take care of the baby. Soo-yeon was not yet able to imagine going that far. Secretly, she bought a pregnancy test, checked it twice, and it turned out to be truly positive, that she was pregnant. Before going to sleep, Soo-yeon informed Ji-yoon about her pregnancy, reluctantly revealing that she wanted to terminate the pregnancy before it dragged on and made her life more difficult. Soo-yeon didn't want to burden Ji-yoon, who was already overwhelmed taking care of her, and now would have to also care for a baby.
잊어버리지 마. 나 치매야.
Soo-yeon was worried that if her illness flared up, she might throw her baby or drown it in the bathtub. Considering her repeated carelessness had been quite detrimental, and she almost set the kitchen on fire because she forgot to turn off the stove. Honestly, as a husband, Ji-yoon was very happy to hear the news that he would become a father, but he still left the decision to his wife. Because she was the one who understood better what her body felt like when pregnant while undergoing treatment.
미안해.
Due to the pain she felt, Soo-yeon could no longer fully enjoy her honeymoon. As per Soo-yeon's wish, the two hurried back to Seoul to have her health checked by Dr. Kim. However, before that, they visited a pregnancy specialist first to ensure the condition of the fetus. As a woman, Soo-yeon was so moved when the doctor said that the fetus in her womb was very healthy and they could hear the heartbeat.
네, 축하합니다. 8주 되셨어요.
Her previous decision to let go of the fetus suddenly changed, and she now wanted to keep her future child. This was in stark contrast to Ji-yoon, who changed his mind after hearing Dr. Kim's explanation that Soo-yeon's pregnancy would be very risky if she continued her Alzheimer's treatment, because it would later interfere with the fetus's development, and there was concern that it might experience abnormalities due to the medication, which is classified as a strong drug.
이런 경우 상당히 어렵습니다만
Firmly, Ji-yoon, who was so enthusiastic last night, now rejected the presence of the baby in order to keep Soo-yeon alive longer and continue taking her medication. However, the stubborn Soo-yeon opposed him and believed that the medication had no impact on her memory development, so it was not a problem if she didn't take the medication for the sake of her fetus. From the time they left the hospital to returning to their apartment, the two of them continued to argue and remained steadfast in their own positions.
이렇게 지멋대로인 줄 몰랐어.
Meanwhile, at Ji-yoon's family home, Yangi's father and mother took turns coming to sincerely apologize for their emotions yesterday, when they wanted to end the friendship that had lasted for 40 years.
미안해. 내가 좀 경솔했던 것 같아.
Ji-yoon's father deeply regretted his wife's impulsive behavior when she was emotional and did not first consider the consequences that would occur. As the owner of the hospital, Kwang's father wants Director Park to step down as the main director because, until now, no one has been considered more professional in holding the position than Ji-yoon's father. Even though the whole family has apologized, Ji-yoon's mother is still deeply hurt by Yangi's mother's behavior, who insulted her the other day.
보다 네가 더 우리를 상하 관계로 다루려 하는 거 나 더 이상은 싫어.
Unlike the rest, Yangi also came to visit Ji-yoon's mother before his family arrived. Now he admits that he has let go of Ji-yoon and hopes that the newlyweds will be happy, and Yangi even wants to get to know Ji-yoon's wife as a close friend. Knowing that her son had just arrived at his new home after the honeymoon, Ji-yoon's mother came to visit. Yes, she even brought some gifts. the woman has not allowed her daughter-in-law to visit her home because her husband does not want that.
그럴 거 없어. 네 복이야.
In the evening, Soyeon was sad again because she insisted on keeping her baby. She shouted loudly and refused to take the medicine. Understanding his wife's attitude, CIH Young then hugged her tightly and tried to calm her down. Arguing with a partner is a common thing in marriage. Even though that night, they seemed to have a fierce argument, the next morning, they could still smile at each other and face the days together filled with happiness. Both of them agreed to take care of the fetus in Soyeon's womb and prepare everything from now on. They bought various books about pregnancy education and parenting during their free time and while shopping. While both of them were still on their honeymoon leave, CIH Young seemed very happy to help his wife with household chores, from washing dishes to mopping and hanging clothes. Everything was done together, while looking at each other with bright smiles. Looking at his wife's beautiful face while she sleeps has become one of the motivations in CIH Young's life. Since she stopped taking medication for the sake of her baby, Soyeon has felt much more overprotective than usual. On the weekend before returning to work, CIH Young and Soyeon spent time walking around and shopping for daily necessities. Since she no longer relies on medication, Soyeon tries to minimize the risk of illness with healthy foods that contain preventive ingredients against Alzheimer's. In the middle of the conversation, Soyeon asked her husband about Hyanki's condition. All this time, CIH Young had no idea how the girl was doing because he didn't want to make his wife jealous.
기분 나빠?
However, on the other hand, he honestly wanted to know if the girl was okay after CIH Young married another girl. In CIH Young's eyes, Hyanki is a good girl and has no flaws or malice in her heart. She even let go and prioritized the happiness of the man who had captured her heart.
이해해주려고 이해하는 쪽으로 자신을 다스렸을 거야.
For a moment, Soyeon felt selfish towards Hyanki. Although it wasn't true at first, that misfortune became a way for her to fully win CIH Young's heart. When gathered at the dining table, for the sake of her baby, Soyeon no longer fussed over food. She followed her husband's advice. If the food was healthy and good for the growth of her fetus, she had to eat it, even if it made her feel nauseous. Her happiness was even more complete, because the two men she loved, both her brother and her husband, were always ready to protect and accompany Soyeon. Meanwhile, at CIH Young's house, her parents were having a disagreement because her father forbade her mother from being too attentive to CIH Young and his wife, especially when it came to sending them food. He believed that his wife's attitude of always defending and spoiling CIH Young was the reason their child dared to challenge him. Not accepting being spoken to like that, CIH Young's mother retorted by criticizing her husband, whom she felt had become temperamental. Even though months had passed, her husband still held a grudge against their son.
섭섭해하지 마. 나는 어미야.
Meanwhile, Yangi began to open his heart to rise from sadness, preparing to leave for America for some time. Before departing, Yangi didn't forget to inform CIH Young's mother to say goodbye. Even though she wasn't his biological mother, Yangi greatly admired CIH Young's mother for her kindness. While Yangi was planning to go abroad, his older brother, Yongso, who had been living overseas, returned home to greet the family. However, instead of being happy about his son's presence, Yangi's father appeared cold and didn't want to greet Yongso. He was disappointed in his son for not showing up to offer comfort when his younger sibling's wedding was cancelled.
있어. 나도 초조해.
얘기 잘 안 됐어?
In his father's eyes, Yongso was considered a child who liked to squander money, just like his mother. Even at the dinner table, the son once again angered his father by bringing up the topic of CIH Young, who cancelled marrying his sibling and chose the girl from Alzheimer. Although Yangi's father appeared very stern, he suddenly became despondent and couldn't hold back his tears, including when his beloved daughter left for abroad for quite a long time. Because he was thought to be mocking his carelessness, Soyeon scolded Mungkwon harshly, even though it was just a misunderstanding. Since he stopped taking medication, Soyeon has appeared more easily emotional and more forgetful than before. Not only Mungkwon, but her husband also got scolded when he defended his sister-in-law. She accused CIH Young of insulting her because he blocked her way to the hot spring. Even though she refused to be escorted from the start, CIH Young still accompanied his wife until she safely reached her destination. Soo-yeon interpreted the concern as an insult to those suffering from Alzheimer.
바보 취급하지 마. 나 아직 바보 아니야.
Se-yeon's illness is increasingly taking its toll, yet her stubborn attitude keeps denying it. While at the office, Se-yeon often doesn't focus when someone calls her because her hearing is starting to have issues. Today, she made a rather fatal mistake in compiling the autobiography documents of an author that would be published. Even though her mistake was quite detrimental, her boss tried to be understanding and asked her to work better. Previously, she was never like that, and Se-yeon's performance was always reliable.
그대로 완성본 뺐으면 5만부 통째로 날렸어야 해.
Her co-workers have secretly started observing and talking about her odd behavior since she got married. They are puzzled why Se-yeon, who was meticulous, suddenly became forgetful and careless. This morning, also sending the wrong document, Se-yeon forgot to wear shoes when she was about to enter the restroom. Realizing that her condition would increasingly interfere, Se-yeon decided to resign from her job. In the end, she was now able to reveal the truth to her boss that all this time, she had been suffering from Alzheimer's disease and could no longer stay at the company to prevent any unwanted incidents.
알츠하이머 치매예요, 편집장님.
While her sister and husband were at home, Se-yeon wanted to capture the moments together by taking pictures of the three of them in turns. She also printed as many photos as possible. This was to anticipate the possibility that Se-yeon might eventually forget her own family.
보조개파고 웃어.
알았어.
Bibitel was brave enough to leave Se-yeon alone and did not yet trust a nurse to take care of her niece. She even always accompanied and helped Se-yeon with household chores while Jae-hyung was at work. Since being accepted at a prestigious company, her sister couldn't come home early and often worked overtime until late at night. Today, she is busy preparing to welcome her colleagues who will be visiting. After work, Jaemin also joined in the festivities, bringing sushi and red wine. Her three single colleagues were so captivated by Jaemin's calm and charming demeanor. They competed to gain Jaemin's attention.
부탁합니다.
네.
Unlike her colleagues who were enthusiastically sharing news with each other, Se-yeon appeared gloomy and unfocused during the event. A short message from Hyun-ju sent to her husband's number made her overthink and accused Jae-hyung of still being in contact with his ex.
나 죽을 때 기다리니?
무슨 소리야?
Intending to end the dispute that had lasted for months, Hyun-gi's mother apologized once again to Jae-hyung's mother. Even though she had harbored disappointment for a long time, Jae-hyung's mother was willing to forgive, and they were finally able to chat again while enjoying dinner at a restaurant. After hearing the news that Jae-hyung was going to become a father, Mr. Park finally agreed to welcome his son's return home with a wife. Although it was initially quite difficult to start the conversation, he is now determined to accept his daughter-in-law. At the same time, he is ready to provide support for her recovery if needed in the future.
약에 도움도 못 받으니까.
He is very familiar with Kim, who is treating Se-yeon and has discussed his daughter-in-law's illness. Mr. Park also offered assistance if Jae-hyun's company needs investor funds. The meeting with his father made Jae-hyung feel so relieved to go through his days. Now, the burdens in his life are slowly fading as his father has given his blessing. The next morning, to fulfill Se-yeon's request, Auntie took her to meet her mother. Even though she hated it, she still brought the two together. Because her niece was so sad to say that this was her last request. Even though at first she seemed cold seeing her daughter who had grown up. But in the end, she couldn't hold back her tears when she found out that Se-yeon had a family. And her little Andy was already working at a company. The two children she had neglected were now living well without her touch. In front of Se-yeon, the woman could only cry uncontrollably. That night, Se-yeon asked Auntie to go home quickly because she didn't want to trouble her. Although Jae-myun refused to take her home before Jae-hyung went to Bali, Se-yeon kept insisting. She felt fine being alone. But unexpectedly, Se-yeon, whose head was dizzy, suddenly slipped in the bathroom, causing her head to hit the floor with a severe wound. Panicked his wife needed medical treatment, Jae-hyung was disappointed, scolded Jae-myun for leaving Se-yeon alone.
들어간댔잖아. 그 몇 분을 못 참아 이렇게 만들어.
In front of his wife, he always appeared strong, but honestly, he was very fragile. When his wife was asleep, Ji-hyung could only cry his heart out in the dark room. Yes, He couldn't bear to imagine if the disease would worsen in the future. A few months passed, and not long after welcoming Hyenji back from America, her mother immediately asked her to go on a blind date with the son of a high-ranking company executive, a colleague of her father.
엄마 나 아저씨한테 가란 거야?
Without objection, Hyenji agreed to meet, but while sitting together, Hyenji showed no interest in the man at all. Soyeon's pregnancy was getting closer to the due date. Although her physical condition appeared healthy, her mood swings were quite extreme. As a good husband, Ji-hyung was always ready to listen whenever his wife complained of feeling unwell. All this time, he was the one doing the household chores while Soyeon rested. 10 days before the expected due date was her birthday. Unexpectedly, 2 of Soyeon's friends came to visit the house to wish her a happy birthday, and also gave her a gift in the form of the latest book published by the company.
팀장님 축하해요.
In the middle of a casual conversation, unexpectedly, Soyeon impulsively uttered harsh words in front of her friends. She opposed one of her friends being in a relationship with Jae-min because that friend had a bad character and was hypocritical. Soyeon felt hurt, thinking that her friend came not to see her, but to seek sympathy in order to get closer to her cousin. Not accepting Soyeon's words, her co-worker retaliated by mocking her illness and then left in an emotional state. Due to his wife's actions, which were considered impolite towards the guest, Ji-hyung apologized to Soyeon's friend, asking them to understand his wife's illness. That evening, to celebrate Soyeon's birthday, the family and along with her children, in-laws, and grandchildren gathered at a restaurant and prayed after blowing out the candles. In front of her entire family, Soyeon kept crying while saying touching words, that today might be her last birthday that she can celebrate together. Today, Soyeon can still remember the names of her family members. However, she doesn't know if tomorrow and the next birthday celebration, she will still be living her normal life or perhaps completely lose the memory of this cherished togetherness with her dear friend Ida. Soyeon kept thanking each and every one present and sincerely apologized for everything she has done so far. Soyeon just wants to create as many memories as possible, even though she might lose those memories later.
내가 마지막 생일일지도 몰라서.
Unable to listen any longer, the aunt cried uncontrollably and asked Soyeon to stop talking. She didn't want her niece to despair because of the illness that was consuming her. As everyone prepared for the cake-cutting ceremony, suddenly Soyeon felt contractions in her stomach. The celebration abruptly stopped, and they had to prepare to take Soyeon to the hospital. Accompanied by her aunt and husband, Soyeon shed tears as she lay weak on the bed. She was ready to risk her life to give birth to her beloved child. Due to exhaustion during childbirth, Soyeon underwent surgery and gave birth to a beautiful baby named Ji-en. After her baby was born, Soyeon truly lost herself due to postpartum depression. She had become a mother, but never touched her baby and only looked at her with a vacant stare each and every day.
이상할 정도로 아이에 별 관심이 없는 것 같다.
Soyeon now resembles a living doll who can only blink and act according to what others direct her to do. When her baby cries, Soyeon doesn't know what to do, so she panics and calls for people around her. Soyeon doesn't want to hold the baby at all because she's worried she might drop her.
힘든 일이 아니라고.
내가 집어 던지면.
From the beginning, Soyeon wanted her child to be cared for by her mother-in-law. However, as a father, Jae-hyung doesn't allow it and wants to take care of his child himself after coming home from work. After his wife gave birth, seeing his aunt exhausted from helping take care of Soyeon and the baby, Jae-hyung repeatedly hired nurses and housemaids. However, Soyeon, who doesn't trust strangers, always acts harshly towards them, causing the nurses to choose to resign. Today, Soyeon still remembers the names of her husband and aunt. However, gradually, she forgets all her normal daily activities, which is becoming increasingly concerning.
나를 믿을 수가 없어.
At Seon's request, Jae-hyun asked Yoongi to visit his home and meet his wife. While she still remembers, Soyeon wants to apologize to her husband's former fiancé and ask that if she is no longer around, Soyeon wants Yoongi to be Jae-hyun's life partner.
많이 생각했거든.
Soyeon realizes how shameless that request is, causing her head to suddenly ache and scream as loud as she can. Even though she once had a broken heart, that wound has long been erased. Now, in front of the woman who once competed for her fiancé, Yengi can only cry because she can't bear to see Jaehyun suffering in caring for a woman with Alzheimer's disease. Her heart holds no grudge at all. In fact, she loves Yen very much and cradles and hugs the little baby when left at Jaehyun's parents' house. When Jaehyun escorted Yengi out of his house, he might have found his sister soaking in the bathtub with a faucet running, still fully clothed. Her body was still soaking wet, and she just lay down on the bed filled with scattered clothes. Seeing the window of her house fitted with iron bars, Suyin lashed out at her husband for blocking access to the balcony, making her feel like she was in prison.
내가 저기서 떨어져 죽을까봐? 미쳤니?
Jaehyun just wanted to prevent Suyin from intending to jump from a height. Even though his wife's actions became more irrational by the day, Jaehyun remained patient and held her tightly when Suyin lashed out. He tried to calm her with words of love greater than usual. While Jaehyun was at work, the aunt diligently took care of Suyin and her daughter. Today, she left Yen at her grandmother's house and took Suyin with her to shop for vegetables. However, Suyin suddenly disappeared, causing the whole family to frantically search for her. Suyin lashed out when she saw Mayang-hee, calling her an evil woman. Mayang-hee could only cry and couldn't even apologize to Suyin anymore, even when she was slapped. Mayang-hee was at a loss for words. To comfort his wife, Jaehyun took her for a walk in a place full of memories from when they were still dating. However, his wife couldn't remember anything at all and could only smile while kissing her husband throughout the walk. Finding her daughter, holding Yen, Hyengi's mother was furious and kept scolding Jaehyun without pause. Even though they had reconciled, she didn't want her daughter to act foolishly like this. Hyengi tried to calm her mother and clarified that she now had a boyfriend and no longer hoped for Jaehyun's love.
좋아서 예은이 보고 싶어서 오는 거야. 엄마 오해하지 마.
All this time, her mother was so upset because Hyengi always felt uncomfortable with the men her mother chose. Day by day passed. Suyin's memory worsened, and this time, she didn't even recognize herself. Seeing her own reflection in the mirror, she even asked, "Who is that woman?"
쟤 누구야?
She also talked to her reflection and wanted to go out because she felt she had no friends. When Suyin wanted to water the plants, she acted like a child, pouring the water into the pot until it overflowed onto the floor. Suyin got angry when Mungun screamed in panic upon seeing her brandishing sharp scissors at her child's face. Suyin wanted to cut Yen's hair because she thought it looked bad. Although it was very concerning, Jaehyun managed to persuade her to hand over the scissors and said that he would take Yen to the salon the next day. To prevent similar incidents from happening, Aunt and Mungun quickly secured the sharp objects in the kitchen. For the first time, Suyin dared to touch Yen when she was about to be taken to Jaehyun's house. She even said goodbye to her and waved her hand. Unable to be far from her niece, Mungun could only cry and reminisce about her adult life. She could tell stories about her great achievements in front of her niece. The next day, Suyin's behavior worsened. She even smashed all the photos in her room, tore up all the sticky notes, and asked to burn everything.
태워! 다 태워 버려!
It was very painful for Jaehyun when his wife no longer remembered him and even referred to him as a stranger who randomly entered her room. In front of the wardrobe, Suyin forbade anyone from touching her belongings and accused Auntie of being an evil woman trying to steal her clothes.
하나씩 없어진단 말이야. 거짓말 아니야.
Now Suyin regarded Jaehyun as a caregiver who guided her to the bathroom, to the toilet, and helped her put on her clothes, even though he was so sad. Jaehyun tried to stay strong when he saw his wife rummaging through the entire wardrobe and putting a sweater on her feet. When Jaimini was at the dining table, she even called him uncle. Now, Suyin didn't even recognize her aunt and uncle who were present for dinner at her house. Only Mungun was the one name that still remained in Suyin's memory.
유일하게 남아있는 것은 문건이 하나뿐.
As the days went by, Suyin became more uncontrollable and often kicked her aunt while she was cleaning the house, trying to stay by her side. Jaehyun now spent more time at home and only worked on Mondays. Although her parents suggested taking Suyin to the beach, Jae-hyun refused and was willing to fight until the end.
태영아,
제가 해야지. 그럴 순 없어요.
Before bed, Soo-yeon rebelled and hit her husband when he tried to put a diaper on her. Feeling treated like a child, she continued to resist. Her aunt suggested it because Soo-yeon could no longer control her urination.
이제 곧 큰 것까지 그럴 것 같은데.
However, the next day in the living room, Soo-yeon tried to put a diaper on herself. His wife's increasingly distressing actions made him emotional, so Jae-hyun could only embrace her while shouting and crying.
하지마, 서연아.
6 years later, Jae-hyun, along with Yoon, who had grown into a beautiful little girl, came to visit a grave with Soo-yeon's name on it. He promised to continue loving his wife even though death had separated them, and the film ended. He promised to continue loving his wife even though.